Detroit basketball. They've done such a good job. JB Bickerstaff, Trajan Langdon. God, it's impressive. And I was talking with my buddy James Jackson from The Athletic, and literally one of the first things we ever spoke about was one of the Cade games from a few weeks ago. And I literally go to him. I was like, dude, when I saw him at OK State, because I went to Kansas and I was able to see him in person, I have always said, and you've been watching the channel, I've said Cade Cunningham as a prospect and even as a player was the closest thing to Luka Doncic since Luka Doncic. I'm not saying they're the same player, but dude, he's slowly becoming Black Luka. And that's why I've said Dylan Harper, who in this year's draft class is left-handed Cade Cunningham. And tonight we'll be talking about Malik Beasley, who rejuvenated his career, having a career renaissance. He's still a young man, but people forget that he was making like $17 million at one point. And the past few, this year he's making $6-7 million. And he's only 28 years old. The guy's averaging 17 points a game, 44% from the field, 43% from three. He takes like 10 threes a night. Absolute bomber. I'm talking putting up shots like volumes. And even in the past few years, his defense had slipped, but he was always a guy that had shown 6'4" with a 6'7" wingspan, that when he wants to, he can play hard defense. Won't try to do too much. He'll hit those open threes, attack closeouts, run the floor in transition. Yeah, he'll sometimes have tunnel vision, but that's just because he's just going to bomb threes. And $6 million he's making this year. And he's really just played himself into either a big contract to stay in Detroit or somebody's going to sign him. A guy who for his career going into the season was averaging 11 points. He had played the last few seasons with Milwaukee, the Lakers, Utah, Minnesota. And that season with Minnesota, when he closed out, he was a 20-point per game scorer, followed up with 36 games where he was almost 20-point per game scorer. I know, but basically in that 50-game span, he averaged 25 and 2.5 assists and just under a steal a night. So he's been someone that I've always thought had all the talent in the world. So let's get right into today's video and talk about this, because the Detroit Pistons are officially back under JB Bickerstaff's leadership. They have transformed into one of the Eastern Conference's most dangerous teams, stringing together the longest win streak since 2008. The 117-97 demolition of the Boston Celtics marked their 8th consecutive win, snapping a 12-game losing streak against Boston and proving that Detroit's resurgence is no fluke. The Pistons, 32-26, have climbed to 6th place in the Eastern Conference, shattering preseason expectations and establishing themselves as a legitimate playoff contender. Malik Beasley has emerged as an X factor for the Pistons, providing instant offense from beyond the arc. Against Boston, he poured 26 points, continuing his red-hot shooting season where he's averaging just under 17 points per game while shooting 42% from three on over 9 attempts a game. That ability to stretch the floor has finally given Cade Cunningham more room to operate, forcing defenses to pick their poison between stopping Cunningham's penetration or contesting Malik's Beasley's lethal perimeter shooting. And when we thought Jaden Ivey got hurt, that it was a wrap, but Malik Beasley's been able to fill that void. Cunningham has solidified himself, obviously, as a franchise cornerstone. He's shook off the empty calories label, averaging 26 points, 9.5 assists, and 6 rebounds. His ability to dictate the game tempo, break down defenses, and create scoring opportunities allowed him to become one of the most dynamic guards in the game. Against Boston, Cunningham had 11 assists, and when he was on the floor, their offensive efficiency skyrockets. It's evident by his 114.2 points per game, 12th in the NBA, and 113.9 offensive rating, 14th in the league, that the Detroit Pistons have. Detroit has obviously built a great identity around rebounding dominance. Jalen Duren has gotten better through the season. I know when you look at the stats, you'd be like, what I'm talking about, but it's more like the mental lapse. He's averaging 10 and 10 kind of. And he's shooting a league best 70% from the field. And he's really starting to be the guy they thought he could be at least. And 11 and 10 is what he's averaging on 70% from the field. And to me, when you watch him, he has always given them a rebounding advantage. The Pistons were 49-33 rebounding wise. Beef Stew came in and gave them some rim protection and also 6 rebounds. And this is a team that has just become remarkable defensively. They're ranked 11th in defensive rating. And Asar Thompson has become a defensive specialist, averaging just under 2 steals a game, a lob threat, uses that athleticism on both sides of the court. And he's closing out games, particularly against elite offensive teams like Boston. Then Tobias Harris, I think the acquisition of Tobias Harris was a huge one for them. And to me, I think that's one that people were shocked when we saw him come here. And he's only averaging 14 points and 6 rebounds, but he's shooting 47% from the field. And his ability to be a 3-level scorer who can go on or off ball, score in isolation, or stretch the floor as a catch and shoot guy, it was huge, especially once you lost that secondary ball handler and explosiveness that Jaden Ivey had. And, you know, he was somebody that in 30 games was having a great season. So one of the biggest reasons I think they've had this rise is the improved depth. Now they have Tim Hardaway Jr., Dennis Schroeder, Simone Fontecchio, Marcus Sasser, Paul Reed, all there who can all be guys that on any given night can provide some depth. Like tonight, Schroeder had 7, 4, and 2. So just little things to help you push the envelope. And then Simone Fontecchio, I know he, compared to last year, is having a down year, but he's another guy that if you need to break the glass, he's going to be available. And I know he didn't play the last 2 games, but that he's another guy that it's just, we know what he's capable of. So it's crazy to think. And then you even have Ron Holland, who's over here averaging 6 points, 44% from the field, that hustle, energy on defense, and his willingness to continue to attack is huge. So with the Pistons sitting at 32-26, holding on to the 6th seed in the East, the playoff berth is no longer a dream. It's an expectation. Having the ability to beat elite teams like Boston and the Clippers, I think proves that they belong in the Eastern Conference playoffs. Their pace is 8th in the league, 99.6, which forces opponents into uncomfortable matchups. They're a league average 3-point shooting team, but if they can push for a top 4 seed, that'd be wild. I think JB Bickerstaff has instilled a winning mentality to this roster, that they're not a team that's tanking. The Pistons no longer are a rebuilding project. They're a legitimate playoff contender capable of making noise in the playoffs. With elite shot making, defensive intensity, and a deep bench, this team is dangerous. So having Cade Cunningham, who's become a star, is huge. But having Malik Beasley be this X factor for you is even bigger. So the Pistons aren't just a young team playing well. They're built to win now with Bickerstaff's leadership, Cunningham's superstar emergence, Beasley's sharp shooting, and a dominant front court. They have all the tools to be a surprise deep playoff run team. And they're here to compete, and they're dangerous. They're no longer rebuilding. So that's where I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you guys agree with me? It's really interesting to see what's going to go on. But that's it for me. But peace out.